how to provide honorable and honest leadership. And no, because I know what you think now, oh, he's now talking about the presidential election. No, I won't. I will make one or two very short remarks of about 10 seconds. But no, we are not going to talk about Biden versus Trump. We are not going to talk about which speech is that way or that way. And we're not going to talk about which TV channel did what at what minute in time, because that is covered by many media stations already. And this is also of very little relevance to your leadership life. We want to talk about something which is relevant to you. And we want to talk about how honest is your leadership. And let's face it, we all say the leadership style we deliver is very honest. But if we look into reality, quite frankly, and very often you see people who are not motivated. The Gallup studies show every year that motivation is less and less omnipresent, to put it in the most polite way possible. People are more and more demotivated, and they honestly do not even care about their organization they work for. And some of them, significant amount of number, meanwhile a 2-digit percentage per organization on average, work actively against the goals of the organization because they care so little. Or they don't even know about the goals of the organization because these goals were never communicated. I remember when I worked for a large company after university, and we had one of these meetings. I was totally inspired by the speech of the senior leader and the CEO. And I talked to colleagues who then went to the buffet, and they seemed to me rather, let's say, less fascinated than I was. And maybe you remember the day when you started working in the real world out there and you were highly motivated, and then just compare your motivation from your first day to where were you after 1 month, 1 year, and then 3, 5, or even more years in your organization or your business right now in the working world out there. So I talked to the colleague and said, well, you seem to be less fascinated about the upcoming projects. And then he told me how often they promised projects, how often they talked about projects, and how little outcome at the end really happened, and how often the leadership team changed. And there was one phrase I will never forget. He said, I survived the last 4 CEOs in the 20 years I'm here right now. I'm going to survive the 5th one as well. And that was the working attitude of that very valued colleague who delivered great services for the company, who loved his job, who never wanted to work anywhere else, but still cared so little because he said leadership simply stopped, to be honest, a decade ago. And do we really have dishonest leadership? And let's just look at a couple of examples from, well, your organization or other organizations. Maybe you heard about the fact that every project is a success. And senior leaders always say, oh, that project was a success and that one as well. And when projects are not really successful, they either stop talking about them completely. So the lessons learned, which is desperately needed and taught in every project management 101 class, doesn't really happen because they will always tell you, oh, we don't have the time. Or they do the lessons learned session on Friday afternoon from 4 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. while people have to catch their buses, trains, or just want to go home at 4:45. And, well, it's slightly less successful than it sounds, these kind of meetings. Every project is a success, no matter how bad it was. I can tell you that in Berlin, capital of the Federal Republic of Germany, they now opened the BER, the International Berlin Airport. And I'm not going to argue about, if you like, the design. Some people say it's retro but real. There's a lot of marketing around that. It's not really my style, but, well, you can't really argue about style, you like it or not. But let's face it, the airport was open with a delay of 9 years. Billions and billions of taxpayers' money wasted on foreseeable problems that could have been prevented in the first place. And still, leadership wants to tell us that this project was so successful. And people who flew from BER right now already say the airport is too small, too outdated, and it is not up for the challenge international travel will face once the economy recovered from COVID-19. And let's just compare the BER to truly international airports like London Heathrow, and you see, maybe the project was less of a success than our leadership team tells us. And now just look into your own organization. Maybe you heard that every project is a success. And it is a legitimate way that a leader says, a failed project can be a success when we learn the right things from it. That is true, but then you have to do the lessons learned, and you have to do it properly. So every project is a success, and we know it is not. Also, every year suddenly is a success. And don't get me wrong, when this year with COVID-19, when you had a tremendously challenging year and you did way better than you thought and you came through it and you made it through that year with way less damage than you thought, then the year was very successful. But there are certain industries which are significantly harmed by what we're facing right now. And it doesn't make much sense to say that, oh, it was such a tremendous success. No, it was not. When you work in hospitality, or just to be very specific, when you work in a hotel, this year will not be a success for you. Meetings did not happen, events postponed or cancelled, and quite frankly, when you look into your bookings, you can't really say that the year was a success. And by the way, when you address a problem, you can derive countermeasures. When you say the year was a tremendous success, some people might ask, so why did we lay off people? Why did we cut salaries? Why didn't we get our bonus when the year was such a success? Why didn't we get all that? So you just raised the profit? Question mark. When you say we are facing a problem, and I know that in the English-speaking world you prefer the word challenge. Use the word challenge if you want to. I can tell you, when you want to implement countermeasures, addressing a problem as a problem has its benefits. That might sound horribly German, but sometimes you need real talk, as the younger generation says. Sometimes you need real talk to implement real countermeasures. So when you say there is a problem and the board of directors took a pay cut and we have to lay off people because otherwise we're not going to make it through the year, people will not be happy but accept it because you all paid your fair share. When you say, oh, the leadership level all gets their usual payment, maybe plus a bonus, and all the others have to take significant cuts, of course, that is the definition of dishonest leadership. A quite similar aspect applies when someone leaves the organization and everyone knows something went wrong here. And I can tell you there was one senior manager who I still very much appreciate for what he has done. When I worked for for the largest Microsoft partner for learning solution, an American company, there was a senior manager called Tim Kletschke. I will never forget that. And another person, I'm not going to mention that name because we don't want to talk down on someone here. Another person left the organization in a quite dodgy way. The person promised to stay, then kept on meeting with that other company, and then just left on the last day possible. And the senior manager wrote an email to corporate and said, with mixed feelings, I have to announce that XYZ is leaving the organization. And that is, especially in America, where you very much prefer to say things in an indirect way. In Germany, we are a lot more in your face. But when you say with mixed feelings, people see, okay, when someone misbehaves, it at least gets addressed and it's not accepted in our network of people right here. So that is a very important step. If you praise anyone who leaves the organization and tell them, oh, such great contribution, blah, 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 this is not good leadership. And I give you an example. When someone makes racist remarks and has to leave the organization, it is perfectly fine to say the person left due to racist remarks and the major sports brand just had to do that. The person left on their own. Well, we all know that it might be more or less on their free will, but at least they said after the racist remarks, we decided to just go our way. If you simply say that someone was such a great value for the organization, you do nothing else than complicity. And also, we never know when you hire someone if they do right or wrong as soon as they do the job. We all were in the situation that you had a very promising candidate, you hired them, and then you saw wrong pick. It is hard to admit, but it's better to let someone go or, to be straightforward, fire someone over keeping someone only to say that was my pick and that person's really great, although anyone knows they are not. I can just give you an example with a racist remark from a mid-sized company. Massively racist remark happens amongst the membership. The owner of the business, more than 500 people working there, publicly said that this person, after talking with the person, of course, and going through the process you have to go through, but then the owner of the business said, yes, it is a senior manager, yes, he is normally of great value, but racism is unacceptable and the person has to leave with immediate notice. So immediately, not in 2 weeks, not in 4 weeks, right now, pack your stuff, leave. And he wasn't talking down publicly, he just made an email, sent the email out, and then told people racism will not be accepted in this organization. And that is what you need. But why do people stick to it? let's say, not very often. Why do we have so many leaders who are not as honest as they think they are? So first, people think of their personal advantage first. When you say every project is a success, by the way, no one will believe that, you think your track record is better. When you say every year is a success, which no one will believe, by the way, you think your CV looks a bit better than someone else. And when you say that every person you hired was a tremendous contribution, which, by the way, no one will believe, you just think people will think you're a genius. And when you say you're a very stable genius, well, we had that before, didn't we? Turns out these people are neither stable nor genius. So people look for their personal advantage first, and that leads to dishonest leadership. Second, when you give jobs away only to people who you know, you call it network. Most people say insider deals or nepotism. And when you give away jobs that way, the question is not if you fail, the question is only when you fail. Maybe you saw during that weekend that Rudy Giuliani had to give a speech for the Trump campaign team. They thought they booked the Four Seasons Hotel, but the campaign team booked the Four Seasons total landscaping, a run-down backyard of a gardening company. So Rudy Giuliani gave probably his last speech for the last Trump campaign in history between an adult store and a crematorium. What a metaphor. That's what happens when you give away jobs based on nepotism. It's not networking when you put people into position they do not belong in. And by the way, aspect number 3, when you like to do deals, so for example, when you have a racist person on board or someone misbehaved and you just try to silently figure it out and make a deal, first, people know anyway. Second, it will come to public. And third, when you do a deal, you commit complicity. So how to do better? Because in the podcast, we want to focus on how to do it better. Step number 1, when there's a problem, talk about the problem. I addressed that before because when you say there's a challenge, or better to say a problem, you can implement countermeasures when you all paid your fair share of that challenge or problem you have. Step number 2, don't only talk about it, but implement what you've done. Don't only talk about, for example, I'll just give you an example, the acceptance speech of Joe Biden. Joe Biden's acceptance speech was the first one in the history which addressed the issues that we need to talk about transsexual people. He addressed transsexual people, gender identity, and that is a tremendously important step. And when you now simply think, well, that wasn't even remotely on my radar, that is exactly the problem. When you belong to the most privileged group, white, male, straight, cisgender, then there's a lot you do not know. This is why you need excellent coaching. This is why you need good consultants, and you don't find them when you only give away these deals based on nepotism instead of looking for skills. And Joe Biden's acceptance speech was a landmark speech, not only in the history of the United States, but also in the history of the free world, addressing issues of non-cisgender people. And step number 3, when you talk about deals, and we all know that from time to time we need deals. I just give you an example. A salesperson tells you, I have an issue with pricing. You say, hey, I meet that client on the golf course during the weekend, and you know you have to give a discount in the situation you're in. When you then, there are 2 options. Either you tell them, oh, I gave them a discount, by the way, and the salesperson will be very frustrated because they say, well, you tell me I can't give discount and then you do it by yourself. Way better would be if you say, hey, we talked about it, we shouldn't give discounts, but I think in the situation we are right now, we should do it as a one-off exception due to the situation we are in right now in the global context. Would you go down the road with me if we just give this one-off discount, if we do it together? And of course, the salesperson would agree. Sometimes, from time to time, you need deals. But when you want to deliver a deal, for example, the Harvard negotiation method talks about BATNA, best alternative to negotiated agreement. You have to do these deals together. And as I said before, don't only talk about it, act on it. When you, for example, has, as I referred to before, a racism case, homophobia, anti-Semitism, whatever it is, when you have these cases and then you start to talk motivational chumbawamba like, oh, the rainbow stands for all the colors of the universe and tolerance, blah, 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 but then you don't act and remove the people who misbehave, you commit complicity. Communication is key. Be honest and talk about the problem. Don't only talk, but act on it. And sometimes you need a deal, but you do the deal together. I wish you all the best implementing that in your organization. And for this week, there's only one thing left for me to say. Thank you very much for your time.